Personal development is a lifelong process, but it doesn't have to take you more than a few minutes to start improving yourself.
You have to get a new mindset. Start believing bigger, dreaming bigger, expecting bigger.
You're inherently valuable, you're inherently loved, and again, you are inherently deserving of whatever life you want without having to do anything else.
Me! You see, the belief of secular philosophers throughout the Enlightenment era into the Romantic period, philosophers even like Friedrich Nietzsche, celebrities like Oscar Wilde, don't forget about Sigmund Freud, all taught from the same songbook, Self. Oprah constantly talks about living your authentic self. All she is doing is echoing a sentiment from centuries ago.
That's the number one thing you have to do, is to work on yourself and to fill yourself up and keep your cup full.
The godless ideology that there are external forces that are keeping you from being you, and you need to break those shackles. Release yourself from the chains. And the highest form of art, the highest form of living, the highest form of morality and values is found in you. That ideology has come full bloom. We now live in a society where self rules, and it is in stark contradiction to the Christian worldview of kenosis. Our Savior emptied himself. He didn't come to be served. He came to pour himself out as an offering for others.
Galatians chapter 3 talks about Jesus becoming a curse. Yes, Zacchaeus climbed up in a tree to see Jesus, know who he was. Jesus hung on a tree to save lost sinners.
Postmodernism, that pernicious worldview that so dominates our culture, has nothing to do with the collective. In fact, it is the antithesis of group. Who determines morality? You do. How should you live? Not in light of others, but in light of self. Have you been canceled by your children?
A few months ago, I took my parents to court for having me without my permission, and I won, so the court ordered them to give me $5,000 a month to cover my basic living expenses. Well, they went and had that appealed, so now they don't have to give me any money, and I have to go get a job.
This is a nasty trend that the kids, they have been hearing for years, that parents, those in authority, they've been keeping them back from living their authentic lives. They are simply manifesting the worldview that they have imbibed. No, you didn't teach it, but they had earbuds and they had eyeballs on their cell phones. They maybe go to high school where they are told, you're the one that matters. Your truth is your truth. And if somebody is constraining your desires to do whatever it is that pleases yourself, well, you need to get rid of them because they are toxic.
I am my own means what I do with my body is my business. If you start with I am not my own, then some of your desires, it means, need to be crucified rather than celebrated. If you're not your own but you belong to Christ, then as 1 Corinthians said, you must glorify God with your body. That's one of the most countercultural verses. Your body is given not for your self-expression, but for God's glorification.
And yet, there is another institution. Woo, is it under assault thanks to autonomy, and that is your local church. Is it possible that you have become a consumer Christian? That your attitude about your local church is one that if it does not please you in virtually every regard, you're just out of there. Now, I'm not talking about churches that go wonky. Those churches exist. Those things happen, and you should skedaddle. But I'm not talking about heresy. I'm not talking about your pastor one day just ripping off his mask to reveal he's actually a wolf. I'm talking about a lot of preference issues that sometimes they cause us to get into a huff, want to take our toys and just go shopping for another church. Is it possible it's because we too have imbibed autonomy?
Jesus said, if any man shall come after me, he must deny himself. We no longer live for self. Self-love was an idol that has been cast down from the altar of our heart, and we now live to love God, and we live to love others. And it's not just goosebump feelings. It's making sacrificial efforts to give of ourselves to others.
The church is a body. The church is a collective. So often the commands for how we're supposed to behave are in plurals. Hey, everybody, when you're doing stuff together, you're offering your efforts up to God as a collective. The Christian life, to be sure, salvation is individualistic, but the Christian life is not. It's a body experience. It's a group thing. We live in community, and yet, so often these days, I fear we've all become consumer Christians to varying degrees. May I ask, have you been church shopping and hopping and bopping because of this or that? And when you look back, these were not heresy issues. These were just things that got up your nose. When are they going to get the lines drawn in the parking? How long does it take these people to just paint some lines on the parking lot? Come on, kids. We're out of here. What might we be revealing? Could it be that we think more about self than others? Maybe, just maybe, we should not only look around in our world, and we can see institutions collapsing because of the worldview that says everything is about you as an individual, and that we need to remember that we can actually adopt that mindset ourselves, and perhaps it expresses itself in the context of our local church. Do you serve regularly at your church? Or do you think the church is there to serve you?
If you're a Christian, you are not a passive observer of what God is doing in the church. You are an active participant. This idea of being a committed servant is so foreign in a world where people pick churches like frozen yogurt toppings. They say things like, I like this part of the church, but not this. But the Bible has a loving newsflash for people that are just consumers of church. You are not in the stands, you are part of the game. Jesus says you have been saved to serve.
Do you empty yourself that others might benefit? Do you use your gifts so that the rest of the body can benefit? Or are you just expecting everybody to do everything for you, and the very second it isn't done, you're tempted, or perhaps you already have, left that body? Might I suggest, if we don't want to see more local churches collapsing into themselves, maybe, just maybe you and I need to do a little repenting from autonomy. Good morning, heathens. I'm your teacher, Mr.